to talk about this Fulbright experience, which was really wonderful for myself and my family, both from a professional and a personal perspective. So a little bit about myself. Claire already introduced me a little bit, but I'm an associate professor of school psychology here over in the College of Education. I've been here since 2018, and as Claire mentioned, my focus is children's social skills, emotional well-being, academic learning skills, and their character. I especially focus on developing assessments of these domains and specifically focus a lot on developing rating scales. So these are measures that are completed by students, their teachers, and their parents, answering questions about how kids are doing in these domains that we can use to identify kids who need help, evaluate interventions and prevention programs, and understand big picture kind of how schools or districts, or in this case, countries, are doing in these different areas. I'm a co-author of several scales, including the latest version of the SSIS, which focuses on social skills, and the Academic Competence Evaluation Scales, which focuses on academic learning skills. And these two assessments in particular were foundational for my experience in Malta. So for those of you who don't know where Malta is, that was one of the biggest questions we got when we first got the Fulbright was, where's Malta? So Malta is a very small country, one of the smallest in the European Union, in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. It's got a long and rich history dating back thousands of years. Many times people think that it's part of Italy, but it's not. It's an independent country. And because of its strategic location in between North Africa and Italy, right in the middle of the Mediterranean, it's been kind of on the edge of a lot of different empires. And so it's been conquered and colonized by a lot of different people historically, including the Phoenicians, the Romans, Byzantines, North Africans, Normans, French, and most recently the British. Uh, Perhaps some of its most famous inhabitants were the Knights of St. John, who ruled the island from 1530 to about 1800. So you may have heard of Knights of Malta or the Maltese Falcon. All of that happened during that period. Malta is also really famous for having withstood some pretty substantial and significant sieges, again, as it kind of being on the edge of empires. There was a lot of conflict that was centered on Malta. First, from the Ottoman Empire in the Middle Ages, and then the second, more recently, as being a major target of the Nazis in World War II. And I present a little bit of information about this in particular because I think it relates to the research that we were doing while we were in Malta, because we were focusing a lot on resilience. And if there's something you can certainly say about the island of Malta and the people of Malta, it's that they're resilient. So, just to give you a little bit of context, in World War II, Malta was one of the most bombed places in the entire war. It was a part of the British Empire during the war, but very close to Italy. And so, very strategic location, and as a result, very heavily targeted. In fact, during the first 6 months of 1942, there was only one 24-hour period without an air raid. So almost constant bombing, tons of destruction, and casualties. And indeed, the entire island was awarded the George Cross by King George VI, which is the highest British civilian honor. And you can see actually on their flag, that's the George Cross. So they're very proud of that distinction. So, like I had mentioned, this I think puts some of the research that we did in context because of this emphasis on resilience. One of the areas that I target a lot in my work is resilience and trying to understand and promote students' social and academic resilience. There's a lot of research that goes into resilience, but to boil it down really quickly, it there's three major components. And I always like the metaphor of thinking about Malta. Maybe it's just because I spent so much time there. But there's three key components. This is a poster you can see. The first is core life skills. And these are the skills that kids need in order to basically interact effectively with their environment. So the skills that kids need to socially interact and develop relationships and friendships with others, to manage themselves in their relationships, and to earn their success in school and in life. This is kind of like the air, land, and sea defenses that Malta would have had in World War II that enabled the country to go out and meet threats. In addition to kind of that active component, another core component of resilience is stress and stress management. Malta is famous for its walls and its ramparts that would have been able to withstand attacks from outside, so the bombs and the cannonballs. From a social perspective, you want to decrease stressors in your environment, as well as to teach stress management skills that enable kids and adults to manage those incoming stressors. And then finally, and maybe less apparent from the metaphor of this poster, is the responsive relationships within the fortress island of Malta. That's one thing that my family and I learned a lot about when we were there, is just how interconnected the community was and how important that was for establishing the resilience of the island. It's completely consistent with the literature on resilience that the relationships that you have are a core foundation for your ongoing resilience. So that's a little metaphor to talk about, to contextualize the study that we did for the Fulbright. And so my Fulbright journey starts several years before I actually did the Fulbright, because there was a lot of kind of work that went into the genesis of the idea and kind of leading into the application. So as I mentioned, I'm an author or a co-author of measures of resilience, social skills, mental health, and things like that. My colleagues and I published a scale focusing on these domains in 2020. And very quickly after we published these scales, we were contacted by a Maltese researcher named Carmel Chafai. He was leading a project in Europe that was funded by an Erasmus grant, developing and piloting a intervention and prevention program that was administered in schools called PROMES. And they needed an outcome measure. So they needed a pre-post measure to evaluate whether or not the program was working effectively. But they didn't have any measure that was well crafted and brief and efficient enough to use. And so they reached out to us to ask whether they could translate the measure that we had just published and use it for their study. And we said, not only would we be delighted to have you translate it, we would love to collaborate with you in terms of conducting validation work. So that resulted in two publications in which we collaborated as a group between the investigators in each of the six countries, Carmel, as well as my colleagues, in term validating the translations of the measures in these countries. But one of the things that always stood out to me was that Malta was not actually included in this study. So Carmel was leading the study, but the country that he was in was not included. And so we really couldn't say much about how kids were doing in Malta. I had come across Malta some years before and had always been kind of interested in its history. I had also been really interested in the possibility of doing a Fulbright. And so I had the idea that potentially these interests could come together in support of doing a Fulbright study to address these questions, right? How are Maltese kids doing? And so I went in with these questions to a seminar that was actually put on by the University of Florida International Center, thanks, Claire, in which a program officer from the Fulbright came and presented kind of the process of a Fulbright and the idea of a Fulbright and how it all worked. And afterwards, I said, what do you think about this idea? And she said, that would be great because Malta's a very small country. and we're always looking to support work in Malta. So from that point forward, I had planned to at least put something in to do this some kind of Fulbright in Malta. But it developed into a pretty extensive study, and that's ended up being the major focus of this project called the Seawall Study. So the Seawall Study was a study in which we translated basically two different of the brief measures that I co-authored, focused on social emotional well-being. That was one of the measures, so that's the SEW. And then the academic learning skills component was the AL, and that's why it's the Seawall study, social emotional well-being and academic learning skills. We had this idea really from kind of the inception of recognizing that Malta was not included in the ProMes study and having some interest in doing that. But the idea of doing a Fulbright to help support this study was a major impetus to actually getting it off the ground. So we pulled together a proposal and we proposed the study to the Maltese Ministry of Education, Sport, Youth, Research, and Innovation. And they were very interested in the study as well. So we had agreed to do the study even before I had been approved to do a Fulbright. This was going to be the basis of the application, though. So I went into the Fulbright with this study planned and already essentially supported by the Maltese Ministry of Education. The Fulbright was awarded in the spring of 2024. So I think there's other seminars about the process, but the application went in the fall of 2023 and was approved in the spring of 2024 to occur in the following spring, as following January of 2025. And as a result of everything coming together, we spent that summer in preparation for doing this study, which involved translating and doing some initial validation work of these scales into Maltese. Maltese is a really unique language. It's essentially a derivative of Arabic because of the particular history of Malta. But it's a very unique and specific language that required specific translation and validation. We launched the study in the fall, and most of it was conducted while I was in Malta from February through May of 2025. This was an intensive study. We're going to see some of the results, but it included thousands of kids self-reporting, getting reports from their parents and their teachers about how they were doing in these different domains. And it included data from 59 different schools throughout the island of Malta, as well as the island of Gozo, which is the smaller island that's part of the Maltese Republic. Um, so it was really quite a complex study. Fortunately, we had excellent support for data collection, and I was there throughout the study as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about just how wonderful the experience of living in Malta was. My wife and my four kids and I were there for 4 months. And I was talking to Claire about it before this session began. It was truly a life-changing experience for me and for the kids. They got to see, I always tell people that they not only learned about how the world is a lot bigger than they thought, but also a lot older. And that is an important lesson that I think they couldn't have learned any other way. The oldest stuff in the United States is a few hundred years old, but the oldest buildings in Malta, you can see actually in the middle of this screen here, is a temple systems that are older than Stonehenge. And so Malta has a very long history, and for them to understand that the scope of history is a lot larger than a few hundred years was also an extremely valuable lesson for them to learn. We got to go several other places in Europe. They got to experience the Maltese culture very deeply, and they got to make some really close friends in Malta, which I think was an amazing lesson of our shared humanity across cultures and countries. that was uniquely facilitated by this Fulbright experience. So that's some of the personal side. From a professional perspective, the study was also a really successful study. So I'll go through just really quickly some of the results, and especially the biggest finding. So in general, we found through this study that kids in Malta had fairly strong social skills, and they had generally well-developed academic learning skills, but where they really had a higher need was in stress. Okay. And to give you a little bit of context, based off of our data, which you know was like I mentioned, thousands of kids in Malta. It's a pretty small country. The equivalent sample in the United States, just to give you a sense of scope, would have been in the tens of thousands of responses, because 2,000 kids in Malta is a high percentage of the population. But the self-reporting of stress was very high. So nearly half of the sample reported above moderate or above levels of stress, and nearly a quarter of the sample, as you can see, reported high levels of stress. To give you a sense of this, kind of the scope of this too, like if you just look at the individual item responses, right, nearly 50% of kids were saying they often are almost worried about things, or felt like they had too much to do. And we also had very high levels of even difficulty sleeping, getting tummy aches or headaches, so physiological symptoms of stress, and feeling worried or tense. So kids in Malta were reporting very high levels of stress. As a result of these findings, the Ministry of Education organized a conference that was specifically focused on the results of this study. This actually happened after the Fulbright was over. So this is an ongoing positive effect of this Fulbright. I was invited back and was back at the end of March here just a few weeks ago to present the results of this study to over 100 policymakers, superintendents, teachers, principals, and researchers in Malta, in a conference that like I had mentioned, was convened specifically to learn about these results and discuss next steps. So I was just back in Malta. Unfortunately, I didn't get to bring my kids. They were not happy about that. But hopefully, I'll find an opportunity to bring everybody back here shortly. Um, in terms of next steps, I already mentioned briefly, but the permanent secretary of education, so kind of like the essentially kind of like the secretary of education here in the United States for Malta, was present at the conference. That's a picture of him right there. He commissioned an action plan be drawn up to follow up on the seawall findings, especially the stress related components. We issued this report. You can see the cover of it right there that outlines the results of the study. And we're currently developing an assessment toolkit. One of the benefits of doing all the validation work to support the study was that there is also these assessments that are ready to be used to help identify kids who are struggling with stress and hopefully meet their needs. There's also been discussions of repeating this study periodically to monitor progress and identify future needs. There's also, I'd be remiss if I didn't note, ongoing benefits for me personally and for the University of Florida. So it's been really amazing to engage with the U.S. Embassy in Malta, and they've been really supportive of the study. It's, I think, exactly what the U.S. Embassy kind of wants these studies, these Fulbrights to be, to reflect really meaningful ongoing engagement. It's also kind of been a great thing for my career. It's enabled me to continue and expand international engagement, to get these awards, and you can even see at the bottom having some results that are now even being discussed in the kind of popular conversation through op-eds in the Maltese newspapers. There's also, like I had said, extended benefits to my continued international engagement. My collaborators and I specifically designed the seawall study to be uh, a template that could be used in other studies. And engaging in the seawall study has allowed me to be more effective at recruiting other students and faculty to collaborate with. I'm currently hosting a visiting scholar from Brazil who's interested in translating and validating some of my co-authored measures and conducting a similar study in Brazil. We're engaging with researchers in Israel to do the same thing based off of the seawall battery. I have students from Jamaica, a new student coming from Bangladesh, and a Fulbright funded student from Colombia, all coming based to do similar work that was done in Malta in their countries. And so the Fulbright really provided an amazing foundation for this kind of continued international research and engagement to better understand and promote the resilience of kids both in Malta, the United States, and throughout the world. So that's a little bit about my Fulbright journey. I'm happy to take any questions before we move to.
Right. If you have any questions, just unmute yourself and ask Chris. Hi, Chris. Did you get to find out what some of the issues that was causing the stress for the kids in Malta?
Yeah, it's a great question. I engaged a lot with educators and policymakers there. Our scales are designed to see the levels of stress, but we don't exactly, the data don't exactly suggest the specific reason why. There's a lot of conjecture. I suspect that, first of all, Malta's not unique. Okay, kids throughout the world are experiencing heightened levels of stress. Some of it, I think, has to do with these a little bit, engagement with smartphones and social media. It's a different social context that kids are growing up in, and that has something to do with it. I also strongly suspect that some of it has to do with the particular academic structures that Maltese kids experience. It's a more high pressure kind of structure. That was something that Maltese people told me repeatedly when I would share the findings. So I suspect that probing that is going to be one of the important follow-up activities that the ministry is interested in doing, and then hopefully making some adjustments to decrease stress and also help kids develop better stress management skills to cope with it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll just say if anybody has any questions about the Fulbright experience, the Fulbright process, application, et cetera, please feel free to reach out. I didn't put my email on this slide, but yeah, you can just look me up on the UF website. I'd be happy to grab a cup of coffee, talk about the process, and provide any support I can. And we'll just reiterate, it was an amazing experience, both personally and professionally, and would love to enable it for anybody interested.
Thank you very much, Chris, for such a wonderful and informative presentation. Really appreciate it. Right, our next speaker is Mwanza Mape. Mwanza is a Fulbright student from Zambia and a fourth-year PhD candidate in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning in the College of Design, Construction and Planning. Her research focuses on land tenure and housing conditions in rapidly changing peri-urban areas in Zambia, where customary and statutory land systems coexist. Her professional experience provides practical insight into planning policies and institutional dynamics that shape peri-urban land development and housing in rapidly urbanizing areas. Over to you, Mwanza.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. And good afternoon, everyone. I just want to confirm if my screen is clear.
Yes, it is.
All right. Just a second. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm delighted to have everyone here today. And I have to thank Dr. Claire and the International Center for providing me this opportunity to speak with everyone here. And it's great that we went to Malta, or we've just been to Malta and seen the wonderful presentation from Dr. Anthony and all the insightful lessons that have come from there. I'll start by saying that before I dive into my work, I'll give you an experience that I had recently. I had a little bit of a panic this past weekend as I was traveling. As you may be aware, if any of you were traveling this past weekend, there were a lot of canceled flights, and I was caught in that confusion as I had traveled to Houston for the weekend, and these caused some delays on my way back. But I want to explain why this weekend was special for me despite all of that, and why the delay in the airport actually gave me time to reflect on my Fulbright experience. I want to allow me to take you back to my early teen years in my hometown, Zambia. In my hometown called Ndola in Zambia, forgive me. It is all right if you can't place Zambia on the map, and I hope that after we've connected in this session, you'll be curious enough to know more about where I come from. And here's why this weekend was special for me. I grew up watching a man called Joel Austin on TV in my hometown in Ndola. And for those of you that don't know him, he is a prominent evangelist widely known across the US, Africa, and parts of Asia in the Christian community. This Easter Sunday, I had the opportunity to attend his service in Houston. And sitting there, I could not help but think about how this all came to be. This was possible because I'm here on a Fulbright scholarship, which has been awarded to me and given me the opportunity to pursue my PhD, conduct my research, connect with America, its people, and diverse cultures. And today, I want to share with you what that journey has looked like. And before starting my PhD, I worked at one of Zambia's leading private universities. I worked as a lead project manager and also lectured part-time courses in real estate. So my background is mainly in real estate. And before commencing my work at the university, I was pursuing my master's degree in commercial property at the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom. And I was awarded a Commonwealth scholarship to pursue my master's degree. My bachelor's degree, which is my first university education, I attend that in Zambia from the Copperbelt University in Kitwe, which is on the Copperbelt province. So given my background, the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at UF was a natural fit for me. And the research I'm about to share with you today sits at the intersection of three things I deeply care about and have been curious about for a very long time: land, housing, and the communities that depend on them. So let me take you to the peri-urban areas of Lusaka, Zambia, which is the capital city of Zambia, to where the city is growing faster than any plan can keep up with, and where two different systems of land ownership are coexisting and are reshaping in ways that shape how communities live, access services, and experience housing. So in terms of the context, what you see is the map here shows you, I think before I have to go back, the map that you're seeing here shows you the global context of land that is held under indigenous peoples' land or also owned by local communities. And it's important for me to show this because it tells us how much land is actually owned by local communities and indigenous people across the world. Now, if you see the map, and it has been displayed for quite a while, if you're seeing it now, the darker shade of it shows you the higher percentage of land that is actually owned by indigenous communities and local people as well. So in terms of customary land, this relates to the land that is held by customs, land controlled by traditional leaders, and also community members and social norms. 78% of land in sub-Saharan Africa, as we know, is under customary tenure, and this is the dominant land governance system. Why does this matter? Now, this matters because by 2050, sub-Saharan Africa's urban population will double to around 1.4 billion people. And much of this expansion and much of this growth is going to happen on the customary land. Now, what is customary tenure? Customary tenure is simply a land governance system where land is owned and used by social norms, traditional values, and also community values as well. And the governance structure that exists around customary tenure enables communities to own land within the areas that they have lived in and is passed on from generation to generation. So in terms of the context and why Zambia matters, Zambia has a dual land tenure system with two systems operating at the same time, customary land on one hand and statutory land on the other. So statutory land is then your privately owned land that is controlled and regulated by the state and has formalized systems in place. Since independence, however, in 1964, customary land accounted for around 94%. Recently, this has reduced to around 41%. And more recent data has actually shown that it's getting lesser than the 41%. As we can tell, this data of the 41% was released in 2022. Now, why do peri-urban areas matter? And these are the areas that I'm studying. They matter because as urban expansion is happening, the peri-urban areas and the urban peripheries are the ones that are absorbing this growth that is occurring within the city of Lusaka. And this is where the two systems of land governance systems exist. So this is where you have your statutory tenure and your customary tenure operating at the same time. And while these systems are coexisting, they are also colliding. And as they collide, they are creating planning challenges for local communities and local authorities in the area. The next slide. So in terms of urban expansion and some of the challenges that have been observed in the peri-urban areas of Lusaka, the map here you see shows Lusaka's urban expansion, and this map was formulated by JICA. So JICA is an international Chinese organization that is working with the government of Zambia and the local authority responsible for planning in the city of Lusaka to come up with a comprehensive plan for the city and also provide solution in terms of how planning infrastructure and provision of infrastructure should be done within the peripheries of Lusaka as expansion is happening. So the study area for this research is to your far right, which is Chongwe district there, the purple location to the far right of the map. And within the literature and also what the pilot study that was conducted revealed is as rapid expansion is happening in these areas, the planners or planning infrastructure is falling behind as it is not equipped to take into account the growth that is happening. But more so importantly, the coexistence of two systems makes it difficult and challenging for the planners to implement infrastructure programs in the different districts where traditional land or customary land in this case is prevalent. The other challenge or planning challenge that has been revealed from the literature and also from the pilot is the prevalence of governance gaps. So within the planning framework, there are regulations that allow for planners to engage with local leaders within the customary areas to come up with planning agreements where the planners can then provide services to the local communities, such as providing water points, for instance, and also establishing boundaries for where different parcels of land are held. And what the study reveals from the literature and also the pilot is that there is not much of a coordination between the planning authorities and the traditional leaders. And this disconnect between the two governance systems creates challenges when it comes to providing services to the local communities, as planners cannot implement any plans without authority, but also without doing it in close collaboration with the local leaders. The other theme or challenge that has been observed is unequal access to services. As the peri-urban areas, and in this particular study, as the study site is expanding, we see that more properties are being built, so people are able to go into the urban peripheries and purchase land to build their houses. So housing development is highly prevalent in these customary areas. But what we also see is there is differentiated housing, as people that are unable to have access to financial resources, or low-income communities are not able to provide piped water for themselves, and therefore they get piped water from communal boreholes in the area. And while other neighborhoods that have the financial capacity to provide this infrastructure for themselves are doing so by engaging private companies to provide these services. And the problem as well that arises with more differentiated housing that comes up in the area is that the planning authorities are unable to then take account of all the development that is happening, as it is happening in a way that is informal or not in line with the planning regulation. So I'll go through some of the key themes that came out from a pilot study. So a pilot study was conducted in 2024, and I have to acknowledge that this was made possible by a pre-dissertation travel award from the Center for African Studies. And what this pilot did was provide a basis of understanding what the problem is and trying to answer the research question, or providing a foundation as well to collect more empirical data by speaking with community members within the study site. And the study involved a collection of data from community members that were randomly selected in Chongwe district. And this involved community members, local leaders, and one government official from the Ministry of Land and Natural Resource Management. It also involved 3 planners from the local authority in the study area, which is called Chongwe Municipal Council. Now, the key themes that emerged were the commodification of land is happening in the customary area or in the study site. When it comes to the commodification of land, the basis of customary tenure is that it is owned by the local communities themselves, and it is therefore not meant to be sold on the formal market. But what we're seeing in the area is that there is a rapid informal land market that is developing, and community members are themselves engaging in selling this land, which is distorting the social norms that they previously held around land ownership. Elite capture and shifting power dynamics is also another key theme that emerged. And when speaking of elite capture, the community members had a term they would refer to when asked what changes they have observed in the area when it comes to land ownership. And they would refer to the urban elites as the outsiders. And this term just reveals how communities feel when people from outside the community come into their parcels of land, buy land, and also build houses or develop or develop properties in the area. So this shifts the beliefs they have around their social norms and practices. And this is leading to a shift in power dynamics. Service delivery fragmentation, as I earlier mentioned as well, and infrastructure exclusion is happening as more communities are unable to gain access to water. For instance, they get access to water from communal points, so they have access to water through boreholes, while the elites or the outsiders they refer to have financial resources to provide these services for themselves because the planning authority does not directly provide this infrastructure. The institutional fragmentation and governance tensions also exist as the two systems of land governance exist together. The planning authorities feel that or are challenged in trying to implement certain services in local communities because they are unable to collaborate with the local leaders who have autonomy over the land governance under customary systems. This is one of the quotes that came from the planners that were interviewed. One of the respondents or the planners from Chongwe Municipal Council, which is the local authority there. And the respondent simply said, coordinating with local leaders is problematic because they operate outside our formal planning processes, and getting their cooperation to implement infrastructure or planning agreements is a persistent challenge. So this just highlights the tension or the lack of coordination that exists between the planning authority and the local leaders. So in terms of the next steps, currently in the process of collecting the main work. So the main field work will be happening during this period. The goal is to gather all the data, conduct the interviews, and also have focus group discussions with local communities within the next 2 months at the most. Now, moving on to my Fulbright, well, this has been my Fulbright experience, but more specifically, what has been the impact of Fulbright on some of my academic and professional growth that I have experienced over the years. So here, what you see are two photos with a time difference of around 3 years. Is it three to 3+ years, almost going on to 4. Now, on the first slide, what you see, or the photo to the right, sorry, or to the left, depending on what you're seeing on your screen, is a presentation that I provided in India, barely a year into my Fulbright study. And this was when I was only getting started. I was trying to figure out what my research question is, or my main research question, where my research is going to go, but also how it's going to unfold over the years. But that opportunity was important for me because it showed me that talking about your work even before it's fully defined is crucial in trying to refine what your questions are. And the feedback that you also get from the academic audience is important in identifying what you want to do further into your research or what you simply don't want to go into. And the other photo here is a recent presentation that I had made at the UF Planning Research and Practice Conference. Now, this for me, or looking at both these pictures alongside each other, just show the impact and growth that Fulbright has had on my academic career since coming to UF, from barely finding my feet and trying to explain my research to being able to clearly identify the trajectory of the research, and also understanding how the voices that I bring to such audiences matter. And it also highlights the importance of how, as Fulbrighters that come to the US, we bring diverse voices and experiences that we share with people here as we learn American culture as well. In the department, or in terms of my other roles at UF, I am also a teaching assistant on different courses. And working with students and faculty members has been extremely enriching for me as I deal with different circumstances, or I'm faced with different situations with students, and navigating how to resolve those situations has been extremely enriching in my academic experience with students or the teaching experience. Other activities that I have been involved in during the Fulbright journey, this photo here shows a moment that I had, a special moment I had because I was part of the Fulbright Enrichment Seminar that happened in Washington, D.C. And through this seminar, I was able to connect with different Fulbrighters from across the world who are doing extraordinary work across different disciplines. And I remember that during one of the presentations, one of the coordinators told us to take a moment to soak it in because it's very rare that we will be in one room with 50 plus Fulbrighters or in the same audience. So that was a very enriching experience for me. I also want to highlight that being part of or the community activities that have been organized through the Fulbright North Florida chapter here in Gainesville have been very inspirational, but they've also created community because they organize different activities and they create spaces for us to connect. And as we connect as different Fulbrighters coming from across the world, it reminds us that we are part of something larger than our individual programs here at UF. And beyond the academic experience, Fulbright has also shaped me in ways that I really didn't anticipate, I think, coming to the US. For one thing that strikes me, or something that struck out to me in the first couple of months coming, was how I learned about how important Thanksgiving or the tradition of Thanksgiving is in the US. I remember the first few days when I was walking the streets were completely quiet and campus was empty. And I realized just how important Thanksgiving or the tradition of Thanksgiving is to families here. And this was different for me, or it was a different experience because the most important holiday back home where families get together is Christmas. So after that experience the first time, I definitely started making plans because I did not want to experience the empty streets after that. I have also been fascinated with the tailgating tradition before every game, something very new, very, very, very new to me. Sometimes when I'm doing runs in the morning on game day or early in the morning, it's always very fascinating to see people come out as early as 7 a.m., setting up their stations right before game day. And that has really taught me a lot about the culture around the games and how big the games are here. I have also built meaningful connections with other Fulbrighters, and I know that these connections are going to span across the program itself. These are connections that are going to last a lifetime. And I also see these connections with other Fulbrighters as opportunities for collaboration, as some of the work that other Fulbrighters are doing is linked to the work that I'm also doing and therefore can collaborate with them in the future. So I would want to just think of them as not just networks or professional connections, but networks that will outlast the Fulbright Scholarship. And finally, I would want to just highlight that the Fulbright Scholarship has not just been able to fund my PhD or to fund my research, but it has also expanded what I believe is possible for my career and for the community I come from, but also the people in peri-urban areas whose research I am highly focused on and whose stories I am committed to telling in terms of how they are experiencing the changes that are happening in their neighborhoods and communities. And I'd like to take a moment here to also recognize and highlight the recognition that I recently received from the International Center and from the college. I'm in the College of Design, Construction, and Planning, and I was honored to receive the Certificate of Outstanding Merit, and also recognized for the nomination for the International Student Award by UFIC and my college as well. So for me, this recognition was just a reminder that the work that we do as international scholars, as Fulbrighters, is seen and it's valued, but it's also celebrated. And I'm deeply grateful to both institutions for this recognition. And with this, so the photo simply just shows you the skyline of the city center of Lusaka, Zambia there. And of course, my award as well. Thank you very much, and I am happy to take your questions.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mwanza, for your presentation. I think that it was very insightful for me, especially because I did my master's in urban and regional planning. Um, I am Iwani Martinez from Honduras, and something that caught my attention is that we have a lot of similarities in terms of planning for indigenous communities, both in Zambia and I imagine all over the world. But now that you point out the issues in Zambia, I think that's very interesting. Um, I will also want to work with you in the future to run research and also collaborate with each other through Fulbright. Um, since this is a good place to kind of collaborate and work and explore cultures, I will invite you to join me in Honduras to visit some Afro-Latin communities, which I am working with the City Hall in Limon, Colon, so that we can look for land rights for indigenous communities as well. Thank you, Mwanza, and keep up with the job. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
everything.
Thank you, Ivani, and would definitely want to explore ways that we can collaborate with that research for indigenous communities in Honduras. And we'll be happy to visit Honduras soon.
Any other questions?
I see one from the chat asking, how do you find funding for research overseas? Does Fulbright fund that? Is it the one from Carlos?
Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Carlos. Well, I would say it's a bit of both. In terms of travel to do my overseas work, the direct answer is no. Fulbright does not provide additional funding. So for plane tickets and the data collection that is involved, that funding does not come from Fulbright. That either comes from other sources, other grants, or personal funds. So Fulbright does not then fund international research as Fulbrighters who come to the US. So I think for Dr. Anthony, he was funded because he was leaving the US to go and study in Malta. Am I correct?
Yeah, the Fulbright didn't provide any funding for the study.
Oh.
They provided funding for me to go over there and live there and conduct the research, but yeah, they didn't provide like incentives or anything like that. The Ministry of Education provided some support, but yeah, not Fulbright.
Okay. So I guess that applies to all Fulbrighters, Carlos.
I
So
think that that's
funding.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that that's typical. But I don't know. Maybe there's some instances in which they do actually support research. I just don't know.
Okay.
I don't think Fulbright supports research. Might be the embassies. The embassies might be interested in your project and provide some funding. There's another question from Febby. It says, I'm curious if there were any difficulties that you had to navigate about your data collection with the indigenous communities.
Thank you, Fevi, for your question. In terms of the data, I would say that the pilot went fairly well. There were no challenges when I was conducting the pilot study at the time, as I was during that time simply trying to understand the study area and to see if these questions that I have been developing and continue to look through would be able to be received by communities in a way that they're able to respond to in a manner that is clear. So during the pilot, I would say that I didn't have, I can't highlight any difficulties that I experienced then. But however, for my actual field work, which was scheduled for December, and it was scheduled to happen between December and February, that did come with challenges because I was meant to do the data collection myself and be in Zambia doing the data collection. I was there, but due to circumstances outside my control, I had to return. So I think the challenge there is pivoting my research in terms of the data collection strategies. So I changed from being the one to collect the field data to now coming up with a team of research assistants that would then conduct these interviews, administer the questionnaires, and also have the focus group discussions with community members. So I guess the navigation comes with being able to pivot and change the research strategy when faced with situations that you entirely can't control. Thank you for your question.
So how does the tensions between the elites, the so-called elites, and the community manifest when the elites come into their community and build houses with more facilities than they have?
Right. That's a very good question. And that was shown, most of the tension was shown. Now, a theme that was surprising was some of the respondents said that they've noticed that crime has increased, which is a theme that I was not expecting to find when talking to community members. And I believe this is associated with more people coming into the communities that are, to them, they are outsiders. So the sense of trust is broken. So that's one tension that I picked in terms of when communities exist within themselves, they have a sense of trust. Because remember, customary tenure is built on community trust and social norms, and they have existed for so many years without seeing these changes. Now, as these changes come, and as the elite come into the area, they see that the increased activity is also leading to crime. And that's a theme I would want to explore further as I do my dissertation and also the field work. The other tension I observed in terms of it manifesting there was a distortion of social norms. Now, one of the local leaders I spoke with was running me through how they all have access to grazing land for their cattle. So agricultural activities are the main sources of income for the majority of communities there. As more land is being sold to the elites, what is happening is that land that used to be available for shared grazing purposes is now not there anymore. So many things came up with through that the theme of tension. The other one as well was that they've been living in open spaces without fences, right? So they build their homes and they all have their surrounding land around them where they do gardening activities and without fences because they trust each other. One of the respondents told me that as more outsiders are coming, we see that they are fencing off their properties and they don't want to interact with us. And that's a deeper That's a deeper question to probe in terms of how communities felt safer before these outside come into their communities and they are building wars and not interacting with communities. So a sense the systems run on a sense of community, and that is being distorted. And their norms around community and speaking with their neighbors are changing.
All right, thank you so much. Any other questions for Chris Samwanza? Well, thank you all. We're all in Gainesville. Well, I think one is in Honduras, but wherever we are, we've traveled from Malta to Zambia, and that's the power of Fulbright. It makes the world smaller. So thank you all. We've had two excellent speakers who've enlightened us and informed us about their research and about how Fulbright have positively benefited their careers. So thank you all, and see you for the next lecture, hopefully.